It was a regular weekday morning at a busy bank branch in the heart of the city. The place buzzed with routine activity, customers filling out forms, a guard standing at the entrance with little interest, and staff members typing away on their computers. The atmosphere carried that typical air of urgency, where everyone seemed in a hurry to finish their work. Among the crowd stood a man in simple clothes, plain jeans, a polo shirt, and sneakers. Nothing about him screamed VIP or celebrity. He stood in line patiently, holding a small folder in his hands. That man was none other than Manny Pacquiao, though at first glance no one seemed to recognize him. He looked like any ordinary customer, calm and humble, waiting for his turn. Across the floor, the bank manager, a sharply dressed man in a suit, polished shoes, and an expensive watch, scanned the lobby with a sense of authority. He seemed to measure people not by their character, but by their clothes, their posture, their perceived importance. When his eyes fell on Manny, his lips curled into a subtle, dismissive smile. "Why are we wasting time with people like this?" the manager whispered to one of his staff members, loud enough for others to hear. "Focus on premium clients, we don't have time for small accounts." Some customers overheard and chuckled. Others looked at Manny, assuming he was just another struggling man hoping to open a basic account. But Manny didn't react. He simply stood there, quiet, almost invisible in the crowd. His calmness contrasted sharply with the arrogance of the manager. This was the first spark of conflict, a moment where judgment, arrogance, and disrespect began to collide with humility, patience, and quiet dignity. Does the manager know who he is talking about? How will Manny respond, and what happens when the truth comes out? Have you ever seen someone being disrespected just because of how they look? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The line slowly moved forward and Manny finally reached the counter. His request was simple. He wanted to confirm some details regarding his account and process a transaction. But before the teller could even respond, the bank manager, who had been watching him with a sense of superiority, stepped in. "Excuse me," the manager interrupted, his tone sharp and authoritative. "This counter is reserved for important clients. Sir, if you have a small account, you should use the general desk on the other side." The room grew a little quieter. Customers nearby shifted their eyes toward Manny. Some smirked, others whispered, under their breath, "He probably doesn't even have enough balance to be here. Look at his clothes, he definitely doesn't belong in this section." Manny, however, remained calm. He smiled politely and replied in a gentle voice, "I'm only here to check my account details. I won't take much of your time." But the manager wasn't done. His arrogance only grew. "Sir, you have to understand, this bank deals with high-value clients. We can't let just anyone walk in here expecting priority service. We have standards to maintain." The words stung, not because Manny cared about his own pride, but because he could see how this behavior might affect others. What if an elderly man came here? What if a struggling mother was spoken to this way? What if an honest worker was humiliated simply because he didn't look wealthy? Manny quietly observed, letting the situation unfold. His silence was not weakness, it was patience. He wanted to see how far this manager's arrogance would go. The other staff members looked uncomfortable. A young teller, clearly nervous, whispered to the manager, "Sir, maybe we should just..." But the manager silenced her with a raised hand and a cold glare. "Rules are rules," he snapped. "People like him should wait their turn. We can't waste time on trivial requests." The whispers among customers grew louder. Some laughed, some shook their heads, but nobody stood up to defend Manny. It was easier to stay silent, easier to follow the authority of the man in the suit. Manny took a deep breath and nodded. His eyes scanned the room. He noticed how some people avoided looking at him, ashamed of what was happening, while others enjoyed the spectacle. Yet he did not raise his voice. He did not reveal his identity. He simply stood there, enduring the disrespect with dignity. This quiet endurance built suspense in the air. The audience watching the story can't help but ask themselves, why? Isn't he saying anything? Doesn't the manager realize who he is talking to? What will happen when the truth finally comes out? And there, in that simple moment of arrogance and patience colliding, The tension reached its peak. Something was about to shift, but nobody could predict how powerful the outcome would be. The bank manager crossed his arms and leaned back, looking at Manny with the kind of condescension reserved for people he thought were beneath him. "Sir, I really suggest you take your business to the other counter. You're holding up clients who actually belong here." Manny didn't flinch. He offered a gentle smile and spoke with calm courtesy. "I understand, but I assure you this will only take a moment. I'd just like to verify my account details." His tone was polite, almost too polite for someone being openly disrespected. The young teller at the counter, sensing the tension, hesitated. She looked at Manny's ID folder and then at the manager, unsure of what to do. Manny noticed her nervousness and leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Don't worry. Just take your time. I know you're doing your job." The kindness in his words startled her. She was used to wealthy clients speaking sharply, rushing her, or demanding immediate attention. But here was this man, simple, humble, patient, showing her respect even though he was the one being humiliated. The manager, however, scoffed. "That's enough. Hand me his documents. Let's see what we're wasting our time on." He snatched the folder from the teller's hands and opened it carelessly. Without even looking properly, he tossed it back on the counter. "Figures. Small accounts, small people." The words cut through the room like a knife. A few customers chuckled, others whispered. Manny didn't react with anger. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying the manager as if trying to understand the root of his behavior. Then softly he asked, "Tell me something, sir. How do you decide which client is important? Is it the balance they hold in their account, or the clothes they wear when they walk in?" The question caught the manager off guard. His arrogance faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Of course it's about balance. This is a bank. Money speaks louder than anything else." Manny nodded slowly, as though absorbing the lesson. He turned slightly toward the young teller again and asked gently, "Do you agree with that? That only money decides the worth of a person?" The teller looked flustered, glancing nervously at the manager. I just try to treat everyone equally, sir." Her honesty was timid, but it was there. Manny's smile widened softly. Then Manny leaned back and addressed the manager again, his voice still calm, still respectful. "You see, I come from a place where people often had nothing. I grew up in poverty. If someone had treated me the way you're treating me now, maybe I wouldn't have even had the courage to step into a bank. But here I am, standing in front of you, and I wonder, what would you do if you were in my shoes?" The room grew silent. Customers stopped whispering. The teller looked at Manny with wide eyes, sensing there was more to this man than met the eye. The manager, however, laughed, dismissively. "If I were in your shoes, well, sir, I'd probably work harder to be taken seriously. Dress better, carry myself better. Respect is earned, not given." But Manny's words lingered in the air, echoing not just to the manager, but to everyone watching. The question wasn't just for him. It was for the audience too. What would you do if you were in his place? The suspense thickened. Manny remained patient, almost serene, while arrogance continued to clash against humility. The real story was just beginning to surface, and everyone in the room could feel that something deeper was about to be revealed. The atmosphere in the bank was tense. Manny's calm questions had unsettled the manager, but what happened next began to shift the energy in the room completely. As Manny stood at the counter, waiting patiently, the young teller hesitated for a moment before speaking. Her voice was quiet but clear enough to be heard. "Sir, you asked earlier if only money decides a person's worth. Can I say something?" The manager rolled his eyes, but Manny gave her an encouraging nod. "Please," he said gently. The teller took a deep breath. "I started working here 2 years ago. I was fresh out of school, with no family connections, no big name behind me. On my first day, I was so nervous. I wore my simplest clothes because I didn't have money for expensive outfits. And that day, one of the clients laughed at me. He told me I didn't look professional enough to be trusted with his account." Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "That comment stayed with me for months. Every time I came to work, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I thought maybe people like me didn't belong in places like this, but I needed the job. My father was sick. My siblings were in school. I couldn't just give up. So I endured the stares, the comments, the disrespect. The customers around the room fell silent. The arrogance of the manager suddenly seemed uglier when reflected against the teller's quiet struggle. Manny leaned forward, listening intently. His expression softened even more, his eyes reflecting empathy. "That must have been very difficult for you," he said softly. She nodded. "Yes, sir. But I kept telling myself someday, I'll prove them wrong. Someday they'll see I am capable, even if I don't look like the people they respect." Manny smiled warmly. "You've already proven it. You stood up just now and spoke the truth even though it wasn't easy. That's real courage." The teller's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she quickly composed herself, glancing nervously at the manager. He, however, looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair but saying nothing. In that silence, Manny himself seemed to drift into a quiet flashback. Though he didn't speak of it directly, his presence carried the weight of his own story. Anyone who knew who he was would recall it instantly. He had been a child selling bread on the streets of General Santos City, running barefoot because his family couldn't afford shoes. He had known hunger so severe that he once went without food for days. He had fought his way into boxing not because he loved fame, but because it was the only path out of poverty. And yet, through all those struggles, he had never let the humiliation or disrespect define him. He fought, he endured, and he rose. Not just for himself, but for his family, his community, and eventually, his entire nation. Now, standing humbly in that bank, dressed like any ordinary man, he was reliving those echoes of the past. He understood exactly how it felt to be judged by appearances, to be dismissed before being given a chance. Turning back to the teller, Manny asked softly, "Do you still feel that way sometimes? That you don't belong here?" The teller hesitated, then admitted, "Yes, sir. Sometimes I do. Especially when people like—" Her voice trailed off, but her glance toward the manager said enough. Manny's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in determination. "You belong here," he said firmly. "Not because of the clothes you wear or the balance in your account, but because of your hard work and your heart. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The guard at the door straightened his posture, suddenly aware of the weight of what was unfolding. Even the arrogant manager seemed to lose his voice, his earlier confidence beginning to crack. Both the tellers and the unspoken memory of Manny's own had transformed the atmosphere. The room was no longer filled with laughter or whispers. Instead, it was filled with quiet reflection, empathy, and a growing realization that something powerful was about to be revealed. The truth was closer than ever, and with it, a lesson that nobody in that bank would forget. The silence in the bank grew heavier with every passing second. The young teller's story had touched the hearts of everyone present, and Manny's gentle encouragement only deepened the weight of the moment. Yet, the manager still clung to his arrogance, shifting uncomfortably in his seat, but refusing to admit he might have been wrong. Enough of this sentimental nonsense, the manager finally snapped, trying to regain control. "Sir, let's stop wasting time. If you want to use the bank, then please present proper identification so we can see what kind of account you actually have." Manny nodded calmly and slid his folder across the counter again. The young teller hesitated but opened it. Inside were official documents, identification papers, and bank statements. Her eyes widened almost immediately. She blinked, looked again, and then quickly turned pale. The manager, impatient, snatched the folder from her hands. He flipped through the documents carelessly, but his expression shifted the moment his eyes locked on the account details. His arrogant smirk vanished. His hand froze. His eyes darted across the numbers again and again as though he couldn't believe what he was seeing. This can't be right," he muttered. "Is this millions in US dollars?" The teller whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Yes, sir, it's correct. This account, it belongs to Manny Pacquiao. The room erupted with whispers. What? Did she just say Pacquiao? No way, that's him? Oh my God, it is him. I didn't recognize him without the suit and the cameras. Customers turned to look at Manny, their eyes wide with shock and sudden respect. Even the guard at the door straightened, realizing the quiet man who had walked in so humbly was none other than the national hero, a world champion, and one of the most generous figures in the country. The manager's face turned red. His voice faltered. You're Mr. Pacquiao? Manny gave a small, humble nod. Yes, but that doesn't matter. I didn't come here to be recognized. I came here as a client, just like anyone else. The words struck harder than any accusation. The crowd around them grew quiet, listening intently. The young teller's hands trembled as she carefully placed the documents back in the folder, her eyes filled with tears. Sir, I'm so sorry. I should have realized sooner. I didn't mean... Manny gently raised his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. You don't need to apologize. You treated me with respect from the beginning. That's all I ask of anyone. The weight of his words fell squarely on the manager, who now stood exposed before his staff, his customers, and most importantly, himself. The arrogance that once made him feel powerful now made him look small, petty, and deeply ashamed. Some customers whispered words of admiration. He stayed calm the whole time. He didn't even get angry. Imagine someone that powerful, that rich, and still so humble. Others looked at the manager with open disapproval. A woman muttered, and to think he was laughing at him just minutes ago. The bank was no longer a place of routine transactions. It had become a stage for truth. Truth about appearances, about arrogance, about humility, and about respect. Manny quietly gathered his folder, but instead of leaving, he looked directly at the manager. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of struggle and triumph. You see, sir, people don't always show their worth on the outside. Respect should not be based on clothes or titles or how much someone looks like they have. Respect is something you give freely, and because it costs nothing, and yet it means everything. The crowd nodded. Even the guard at the door lowered his head in agreement. The young teller wiped her eyes, deeply moved. The manager, unable to meet Manny's gaze, muttered something close to an apology, though the words stuck in his throat. His pride had been shattered, his arrogance exposed, and in that moment, he stood not as a figure of authority, but as a man who had just been taught a lesson in humanity. The truth was revealed. The humble man he had mocked was not only a client, but a legend. And soon Manny was about to make a decision that would change everything. The bank lobby was tense. Everyone had heard Manny's thoughtful questions, and everyone had seen the manager's arrogance. Still, the truth had not yet surfaced. The manager, desperate to re-establish control, spoke again. Sir, I've asked, politely, and I'll ask one last time. Please show proper identification. If you really have an account here, we'll confirm it. If not, I suggest you don't waste our time. Manny didn't argue. With the same calmness that had carried him through the insults, he opened his folder and slid it across the counter. Inside were neatly arranged documents, his government IDs, his client card, and several official account papers. The teller picked them up first. Her eyes scanned the details, and suddenly her jaw dropped. She looked again, checking the numbers twice. Her lips parted as though she wanted to speak, but no words came out. The manager, growing impatient, snatched the folder from her hands. Give me that, I'll handle it. He flipped through the pages quickly, almost dismissively, until his eyes froze. The color drained from his face. His confident smirk twisted into disbelief. This must be a mistake. The lobby fell into a hush. Customers leaned closer, curious. What's wrong? Someone whispered. What did he see? Another asked. The manager swallowed hard, flipping the page again. His voice trembled now. These accounts, millions, multiple currencies, US dollars, pesos, euros. This balance is enormous. The teller, unable to contain it anymore, said softly but clearly, "Sir, this account belongs to Manny Pacquiao." The words hit the room like thunder. Gasps, whispers, heads turned, eyes widened. Pacquiao? Did she just say Pacquiao? No way. Is that really him? Oh my God, it is him. I didn't recognize him at first. Slowly the pieces clicked. The humble man in jeans and a polo shirt, the quiet patience, the calm strength. There was no mistake. The man standing silently before them was none other than the world champion, the national hero, and one of the most generous public servants in the country, Manny Pacquiao. The guard at the door stiffened to attention. A few customers immediately pulled out their phones, though most were too stunned to move. The arrogance that had filled the room moments earlier dissolved into awe and embarrassment. The manager's lips trembled, his voice cracked. Mr. Pacquiao, is this really you?" Manny gave the faintest nod, his smile humble and unassuming. "Yes, but I came here as a client, not as a celebrity. I don't expect special treatment." The words stung more than any rebuke. The manager had mocked him, dismissed him, and humiliated him, not knowing he was standing in front of someone whose name carried respect all over the world. The young teller, tears glistening in her eyes, whispered, "I'm so sorry, sir. I should have realized, I didn't mean..." But Manny lifted his hand gently. "You treated me with respect from the beginning. You have nothing to apologize for." The crowd's whispers grew louder. "Look at how humble he is." He didn't even raise his voice. And the manager? He's the one who looks small now. The spotlight shifted completely. What had started as a moment of humiliation had now become a lesson unfolding in real time. Manny looked directly at the manager, his tone steady but compassionate. "You see, sir, people's worth isn't measured by their clothes, their titles, or how expensive they look. True worth comes from honesty, hard work, and respect. Respect costs nothing, but withholding it, that costs everything." The customers nodded in agreement. Some even murmured, "That's right." Under their breath, the manager stood frozen, sweat forming on his brow. The power he thought he had over this ordinary man had crumbled in seconds. The truth had exposed him, not only Manny's identity but his own arrogance. The bank, once filled with whispers of judgment, now buzzed with a different energy, admiration, reflection, and the quiet anticipation of what Manny would decide to do next. The truth was no longer hidden. Everyone knew. And now, the stage was set for transformation. The entire bank had fallen silent. The arrogant manager stood frozen, still holding the folder that revealed the truth about the man he had mocked. The whispers of customers swirled around him like a storm he could no longer control. Manny looked at him, calm but firm. "You see, sir," he said softly, "when you judged me by my clothes, you thought I was small. But if you treat people this way every day, imagine how many lives you've made feel small. Respect should never depend on appearances." The words cut deeper than any insult. The manager's proud posture collapsed. His eyes darted nervously around the room. The customers, once silent, now stared at him with visible disappointment. His authority had shattered. Manny turned to the young teller. "You," he said with a warm smile, "reminded me of myself years ago. Humble, hard-working, yet underestimated. I want you to know you are valuable, and your courage today has shown everyone the truth." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice breaking. Then Manny spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "I came here today for a simple transaction. But now I've decided something bigger. I will open a new account in this branch for my community project. The funds will support scholarships for students who, like me once, cannot afford education. But there is one condition. Everyone." Leaned closer. The manager swallowed hard. Manny's tone sharpened, though still calm. "This bank must promise to treat every client with respect, whether they wear a suit or slippers, whether they bring millions or just a few pesos. Everyone deserves dignity, The crowd erupted into applause. Customers nodded in agreement. Some even clapped the teller on the shoulder, proud of her courage. The manager's face turned red with shame. "Mr. Pacquiao, I deeply apologize. I did not realize." Manny stopped him gently but firmly. "You don't need to apologize to me, apologize to them." He gestured toward the staff, the customers, the people who had been silent witnesses to the humiliation. The manager bowed his head, unable to meet their eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice low. "I will do better." It was a moment of reckoning. The powerful manager, who moments ago had looked down on Manny, now stood humbled before the very people he once dismissed. The transformation was complete, not just in the manager, but in the room itself. What began as arrogance had turned into a lesson of humility, justice, and inspiration, and Manny, as always, left not with anger, but with kindness, proving once again that true greatness comes not from wealth or fame, but from the way you treat others. The bank lobby was still buzzing after Manny's announcement. Customers who had witnessed the entire scene now looked at him not only with admiration, but with respect that ran deeper than fame. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't flexed his status, and he hadn't humiliated the manager in return. Instead, he had chosen kindness, humility, and an action that would help others for years to come. The young teller wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "Sir, you don't know what this means to us. To see someone like you stand up for ordinary people, it gives us hope." Manny smiled warmly. "Hope is for everyone. Sometimes we just need a reminder that every person matters." The manager, now visibly shaken, stepped forward. His voice was low and strained but honest. "Mr. Pacquiao, I was wrong. I judged you without knowing you. I disrespected you without cause, and I disrespected others too. Please accept my apology." Manny looked him straight in the eye, his tone gentle but firm. "I accept your apology. But remember, your position gives you power over people who cannot always defend themselves. Use that power to lift them up, not push them down." The words landed like a final punch of truth. The manager lowered his head in shame, but also in understanding. It was not just a rebuke, it was a chance to change. Around the room, customers began speaking up. "She's right. We all deserve respect. Rich or poor, we're still human beings." That was the lesson we needed today. The applause that followed wasn't just for Manny. It was for the message he had delivered. Before leaving, Manny turned back one last time and addressed the entire lobby. His voice was steady, humble, but carried the weight of his journey. Never judge someone by what they wear or how much money they seem to have. You don't know their struggles. You don't know their story. I was once the boy who had nothing, and people laughed at me too, but I learned that kindness costs nothing, and it is the richest gift you can give. So I ask all of you here today, carry that lesson with you. Treat everyone with respect, because in the end, that's what defines us. The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Some clapped, others had tears in their eyes, and even the guard at the door saluted quietly in respect. Manny gave a humble nod, picked up his folder, and walked out of the bank as quietly as he had entered. But he left behind something far greater than an account or a transaction. He left behind a story, a memory, and a lesson that nobody in that room would ever forget. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because your story matters too.